In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. Everybody sounds tired today. Are those tired? I wanted to speak today. Today's Pentecost, as you very well know, but also there's a saint in particular today, this saint right here, if you look right here on the bottom, Saint John the Russian. And I wanted to take a moment just to speak about him because we have so many relics in our church, and we have some clothing and the actual bone relics of the saints. And I wanted to talk about him. He's from his body, his relics are in Evia, Greece. And he is also, if you read about now Saint Iakovos Tsalikis, who is a newer saint. He was just made a saint by the Patriarchate in the fall, I believe. He used to speak to St. John all the time. Now, St. John's died at the age of 40 years old, right around there. He's from the late 1600s. He was not a martyr in the church, but he suffered during his whole life. He was under Muslim control as far as being a slave to Muslims. He was tormented, he was tortured, and then at the end of his life, he dies in peace. But his relics, after he died, his relics were burned. They were thrown into a fire. And now you might be asking yourself, how are his relics incorrupt if they were thrown into the fire? But if you see his relics, which are very easy to view, even if you go on the internet, you'll notice his relics are black. So his face, his hands, everything's intact, but they're black. And the reason for that was his relics were removed from the ashes of this fire where they tried to destroy his relics. And they were not destroyed. They were just made black, almost like charcoal. And they took on the smoke tinge from the smoke and from the burning ashes. So his relics are very, very, very dark, but they are intact. Now, St. John is St. Iakovos, the new saint that I just mentioned, who is proclaimed a saint this past year, used to go to his church where he's at in Evia and speak to him many times. And there's many miracles of St. John with St. Iakovos and also St. David of Evia, where St. Iakovos served and lived his life. But St. John, his relics, when people would go to greet him and go to venerate his relics, sometimes they would see his relics move. And sometimes he would give a blessing to a person, and sometimes he wouldn't. And St. Iakovos was there, and if you read the life of, I believe it's in Garden of the Holy Spirit, which is a book that we have in our bookstore, that's authored by, or just the stories in the life of St. Iakovos, or Elder Iakovos, I believe it's in that, before his canonization. It speaks about how he used to say to someone, well, because of your disposition, he didn't give you a blessing, and now he blesses you, but he moves a lot. And one of the things that I wanted to mention specifically in reading about his life is that he is incorrupt, and his clothing he's vested in his reliquary case. And one of the interesting things that you don't really see or hear about when they change the shoes, like we have the shoes of St. Dionysius, St. Gerasimos, and a piece of the shoe of St. Spiridon. And they're changed at different times of the year. Some are changed every 6 months, some are changed on the feast day, some are changed every quarter or whatever, every 3 months they change the shoes or the clothing. We have the pillowcase of St. Paraskeva and her clothing, which is changed at kind of not specific intervals of time, but rather periods of time where the church decides they're going to change it. And we have St. John the Russian of Evia that we commemorate today. And one of the interesting things that I wanted to share with you is it's not on a schedule that his clothing has changed. It's not a particular time of year. It's not even on his feast day. How his clothing has changed is he himself will speak, as it's said, to a pure soul in a dream to come and to visit and to ask the priest there to change his clothing. So there's been stories of people from Australia, from New York City, from all over the world, from different parts of Greece even, from Thessaloniki and different areas and different countries, who have had dreams of this saint coming to them, saying who he is, and saying, you need to go to my church and speak to the priest there and tell him to change my vestments. Isn't that something? I mean, when you think about St. John asking someone to go do that. He also, there's a story of him speaking to a little girl and saying, come to my tomb and change my pillow because I've been weeping. And this girl told her parents, they went to St. John's tomb, and the priest opened it up, and they didn't really see anything. And then when they turned, they turned to look on the other side of the pillow, they could see that he actually had tears, and his pillow was soaked in tears on the one side, and they changed his pillow. So there's many times, and his head has been known to move, his relics have been known to jostle and make noise and move. He is a very active saint in Evia and also a very active saint throughout the world. It's maybe, with all the kind of higher name brand saints, if you want to call it that, the saints that we know their names, and like St. Basil, St. John the Baptist, and all these other saints, St. John the Russian is a very important and very active saint in the life of the church. And his relics were discovered not by his appearance, but about 3.5 years after his death. St. John the Baptist appeared to an elder priest in the area and said, go in this area and you will find John the Russian, and exhume his relics and bring them and place them in the church. So St. John the Baptist was the one who spoke to this world to tell us about St. John the Russian. So I encourage you today, when you go home, to type in on the internet and look and read about St. John the Russian. Most of the writings of his life, the best writings, are in Greek. However, there's an interesting thing. If you don't read Greek, there's an interesting thing you could do. Google Chrome. Everybody knows what Google is, right? Google Chrome. There's an option on Google Chrome where you can click on it, and it will translate from any language into English. It'll read the website. You can go to a Chinese website, you type it in, and hit translate to English, translate it to English. Now, the English is a little bit rough in some ways, but if you know some Greek and you know English, obviously, you can get the full meaning out of it. But it is a great tool because a lot of the writings and the miracles and the stories of St. John are in Greek. So if you are unable to read Greek, you can just download Google Chrome, add it, and translate into English. But I wanted to let you know that we have his icon here. It's a very dear saint, and a saint who's connected with other saints. And I'm going to leave you with one last story about St. John. There was this is actually, you can watch, I believe it's this story on YouTube about Elder Iakovos Tsalikis, who is now St. Iakovos. This couple goes to this church, and to his church, St. John's Church, and they're trying to go in to see St. John and to venerate his relics. And there's this monk on the outside in the foyer area, and he says to them, "Hi, how are you?" He introduces them to the church and says hello, and they ask if they can go in, and he says, "Wait a second, did you go receive confession?" And they said no, and he says, "Well, you need to go receive confession before you come in to the church to see St. John." So they leave. The woman, as she's leaving, starts to feel nauseous. So they stop at a pharmacia, like a roadside pharmacy area, and they go in, and she gets like Tums or something for her stomach. She's paying for it, and the lady's ringing her up, and she looks behind the lady and sees a picture of the monk that was in the church, standing, this picture. And she's like, there he is. She tells her husband, there's that monk we just saw at the church. And the lady at the register says, what do you mean, this monk right here? And she's like, yeah. And she goes, are you sure you saw him? And she said, yeah, he just talked to us and told us, we needed to go for confession and then to come back. And she says, that's Elder Yakovos, and he passed away a few years ago. So Elder Yakovos now is St. Yakovos, and was one that was always connected with St. John the Russian, spoke with him many times, had very many miracles that were associated. But it's a very unique and holy place in Evia. If you're ever to go there and to see it, that's wonderful. But if you're not, the beautiful thing about technology is you can practically get there with going on the internet and seeing. And the beautiful thing about the church and the grace of the Holy Spirit is you don't have to go anywhere. You're here. You're here in the church, and the Holy Spirit works and sends us these saints to watch over us and to speak to us and to bless us, to guide us, to heal us, and to walk with us. I pray that St. John and all the saints continue to be alive in our lives, in your life, and that you continue to reach out to them and to speak to them and to learn who they are, because the relationships that you develop with them are relationships that you develop with God ultimately. And when we look at our lives and we think about getting to heaven, it's not like passing the finish line and winning and saying, oh yeah, now I won the gold and I'm in heaven. Heaven is more than just a place. It is a deep relationship with God. And the relationship starts here. It doesn't just start when we die. So now is the time to continue to develop that relationship, and the saints will help us do that. And St. John the Russian is one of those saints that will help us along the way. Amen.